Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. As always, I'm joined by my tag team partner, Kevin Midgette. Everybody would always say the Super Bowl was over. What's left to talk about? But as I always say, NFL never sleeps. There's always great off-season stories to talk about. And, we'll keep it going all off season. We'll have much to cover. And, Kevin, the parade, though, happened. And all the friends and family in Philadelphia, they went. Now, my one good friends, and we've been friends with them a long time. They took their teenage sons, and they told me there might have been a little pushy shovey at the railing, because
Mhm.
some people are getting a little out of hand. And but overall, I would say it was a great celebration for Philadelphia. And you didn't go, did you?
Not a chance. Not a chance was happening. I went when the Phillies won in 2008. I saw a parade. It's off my bucket list. I'm good. It's like I saw New Year's Eve in Times Square once. You do it once. I'm all right. I know what it's all about. I'm good.
Yeah, there are a couple items I've crossed off as well, and you're right. If you don't like crowds, and that's what I was saying to my friends, and my sister went to with her daughters, and I was like, sometimes when you don't have your space and it's crowded, and we're born and raised in the Philadelphia area, so we know how Philly people are. You get people in close quarters, and there's drinking involved, and maybe a little smoke, all kinds of stuff out there, and you just don't know how people are going to react. Now, there was a situation I heard where there may have been some gunfire or something. They did actually get the individual involved. I saw that today, and uh, we're going to bring on OJ Spivey later on in the show. He's a beat writer from the Philadelphia Tribune. He was at the parade covering it, so I want to get his take on that, as well as he was there at the NFC Championship game. And as a guy that's born and raised in Philadelphia too, just kind of get his feeling on it. But great celebration for the Eagles. But eventually, you got to turn the page. When should people start saying, okay, celebration's over, start preparing for next season? What do you think?
I think it started soon as the clock read zeros at the Super Bowl. I think that at that point it's like, all right, unless you're the Philadelphia Eagles or a fan base for the Philadelphia Eagles, the season starts now. Now you have to start, thinking about what you're going to do, what off-season moves you're going to do. And once again, we're going to get into later the franchise tag game, who you're going to tag if you're going to tag anybody at all. It all begins soon as the clock hits zero.
Yeah, and for the fans it does, but I know for Howie Roseman and Sirianni and Jeffrey Lurie, the owner, they did start thinking about, they're on the next season, I know the fans are excited and they're talking about, okay, it's our turn to do the repeat, kind of like KC did, but every season's different, and they're going to have that bullseye on their back. But still the legacy lives on for the Eagles, and we'll get into this with OJ, but I wanted to get your take on it. Still, a lot of people are debating the legacy of Jalen Hurts, and you and I talked about it a couple weeks ago with Ray Dittinger. Um, but Pete Prisco from CBS Sports came out with a list, and he said Hurts is still not in the top five. And I just think it's absolutely ridiculous. Kind of like what Ray said, he's a winner. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. He just won the biggest game there was. Who cares about stats and who threw for 40 touchdowns and 5,000 yards and all that? He's the one walking away with the trophy. So in the end, I just think it's ridiculous talking about he's still not close to the top of the mountain of the quarterbacks.
I think one of Jalen's biggest supporters, and we saw it, was Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw didn't hang these gaudy numbers or anything else, but you know what he did? He won 4 Super Bowls. He was a winner and he won games. And we talked about on the show the previous weeks, and I think Jalen's personality has a lot to do with that. He's not flashy. He doesn't sit, give you the sound bite that you want. He's a consummate professional. He goes out, he does his job, he wins games. And as far as a media outlook on it, I think it's a deterrent for people if they want to give him his flowers or not.
Yeah, he's very stoic. I have enjoyed watching, the Eagles doing the rubber chicken circuit. They were on Jimmy Fallon, and to Hurts and Saquon's credit, they're like, we're not coming on unless the offensive line comes on, and those guys they're enjoying the flowers of success, and eventually they will turn the page next season. But I think a lot of the, Hurts, I won't say haters, but doubters, um, they just won't, back off it and admit it, and much like I had to do, I had to eat some humble pie after the Super Bowl. I said Jake Elliott was going to have a bad game. Well, Elliott made 4 for 4, and then, he showed me. So, why can't they just say Hurts did what he had to do? He's the champion. Give him his respect.
I think there's still time to do that. I think everyone had Mahomes elevated on this Mount Rushmore of greatest all-time quarterbacks already. It's hard for them to switch gears and go, it's like, you know what? He's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's hard to put anybody in that category with him that's currently playing. That's actually won some hardware.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting to see how this shakes out. But I was like, all right, even though Hurts is, his postseason record is now 6-3. I believe Donovan had 9 postseason wins, so he's getting closer to that. 1-1 in the Super Bowl, 46-20 in a regular season. And it just shows you, okay, I know you and I love fantasy football, but sometimes stats, come on. Who cares about the stats? This guy's a winner. He has a trophy. And then I started looking, all right, I put my list together and I was like, all right, Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Burrow, and then Hurts maybe at 5, Jaden Daniels, Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Herbert, Matthew Stafford. So, I mean, that's what I put together for now. And of course, everybody's going to debate and this and that, but in the end, it's like, it's all banter.
Yeah, it's nice to kick around the curb a little bit there with the can. It's like at the end of the day, he wins games. I mean, if he wins another one, now you know what's going to happen. I mean, the odds are probably against it. Say though, hypothetically, the Eagles win another Super Bowl, they go back to back. You're going to see people that didn't want to put him in the top 5. Now it's like, oh, he could be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. It's like people will flip flop on him just like that.
Yeah, and the talking heads, and I was talking about this earlier on Rich Q's show today. Everybody's got an editor or producer or something. They're like, all right, come on, let's get a hot take, let's put it out there, let's get people talking, let's get them calling in, etc. And I almost, some of them, it's laughable where you can't even believe what they're saying when they're like, oh, Hurts is still, I put Hurts behind Purdy, or some of these guys ain't even been close to the mountaintop. So definitely give him his flowers, and it's something people are going to watch as the off season goes along, and he has the contract. The key thing is, and I wanted to start your take on this, is looking at the off season for the Eagles. So the Eagles, they are genuinely a pretty young team, but there are some key free agents and on the roster, and I want to get your take. Coming back, not coming back type of situation. Dallas Goddard, I believe he's still under contract, but it's a situation where they may make him a June 1st cut. Do you think Dallas Goddard's back to tight end, and how would the Eagles move on from him if he doesn't?
I think Dallas Goddard is a nice tight end. I think he's had some injury problems, which we've seen over the past couple of seasons. I think the Eagles, for the first time, actually weathered the storm a little bit with his injuries this year with Calcaterra, actually, putting up a little bit of offense for him. That being said, I would like for Dallas Goddard to come back, but could they move on without him? Yeah, they could move on without Dallas Goddard.
Yeah, Kenny Gainwell, he's been a good, serviceable second string running back, catching the football as well. He's a free agent. Do the Eagles bring him back, or do they start transitioning more to Will Shipley?
I think you could find somebody in the draft to take his spot and jump over Shipley. I mean, Kenny Gainwell, like you say, he's a nice running back. He's nice. Give Saquon a couple of blows on the sideline there, get his breath. But Kenny Gainwell, you can find.
All right. On defense, Milton Williams. Now, this is an interesting one because I think he's due for a payday, and they have a lot tied up on that line already. Will they be able to pay him?
I think he stays. I think he's one of those guys they actually see as part of the future of this team. The thing is, though, someone's got to go in the mix. I mean, you got guys like Becht and Sweat and Zach Bond, and it's like who goes, who stays. But I think he stays.
Okay, good one. And then how about, yeah, you just said the name Josh Sweat, huge Super Bowl. I think he had 2 sacks in the game, and he was just dominant. And everybody said, oh, he's going to get a payday. The other Sweat got paid by the Bears. I guess Josh Sweat will probably get paid by somebody soon.
Don't cheat that man. He had 2.5 sacks. Don't cheat. You know how many more zeros are on that paycheck now for that half a sack? Uh, he might be the one that goes, and I don't want to see him go, but it just might come down to numbers at a certain point. I mean, he played out on the biggest stage that he could to get paid, and I never begrudge anybody for taking the money when they can, especially in the NFL. But he might be a cap casualty.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more at you before we bring OJ Spivey in. Zach Bond, this is the biggest one. Almost was Defensive Player of the Year. Was just tremendous all season. Had that great pick that we talked about in the Super Bowl. Do you think he comes back?
As history has taught me anything, Lloyd, the Eagles do not pay linebackers. They don't. And Zach Bond's another guy. It's like he had a career year at the best time possible, had a pick in the biggest stage possible. The man autographed a baby during the parade. I don't know if you saw that or not. But I want to see Zach Bond get paid. He's earned it, but will it be in Philadelphia? I don't believe so.
That's great. Is OJ Spivey there? I don't see him on screen now. All right. Oh, there he is. Hey, OJ, you ready to roll?
I'm ready. I'm ready. Had
There
to
you
get my sound right, but I'm
go.
good.
Nah, no problem. We got you. We have OJ Spivey joining us from the Philadelphia Tribune. Does a great job in terms of covering the team. He works with my buddy Donald Hunt, who I used to always sit with at the games and enjoy, hanging out with him. So OJ, Kevin and I were talking about, we're born and raised in Philadelphia, and how was it being a native Philadelphian at the parade, at the NFC Championship game? Where's that journalistic smear line? My family always teases me about that. So just talk a little bit about those two events you were at.
Yes, as tough as it is, just the whole rule, no cheering in the press box. But as a native Philadelphian, as you said, it was hard not to, just bask in the glory, just be happy for the city, for the most part. This is their second Super Bowl in what, 7, 8 seasons, and um, they have a good team overall. So it looks like to me that it's another one. It's another Super Bowl uh, on the horizon, perhaps, if they can keep things together.
Yeah, Kevin and I were just looking at the roster. The Eagles are so young. In particularly, Howie's done a great job building this unit defensively with a lot of young draft picks. And do you think, in terms of the window, what kind of window are we looking at with the Eagles? Can you hear me? You're on mute.
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay.
All right. I'm sorry. I didn't hear your question.
No,
I
I was
was
saying
muted
that
out.
in terms of the Eagles, talk about their window. Are we looking like a
Right.
3-year window, 5-year window? If we took, I know all the fans and all my friends and family, like they're now going to, they need to talk 3P. Everybody's all excited about it.
Well, I don't know about a three-peat, and I don't know about a 5-year window because the league changes, within 5 years. And I think we've seen that over the past, really, this last 25 years or so, but even before that. But I think because the team is so young, the core that is, they can get back within the next 2, 3 years, if not the following year. Of course, injuries are always a factor, who you can re-sign and keep on a roster, as I know you guys kind of talked about before I came on. So it's a lot of factors, but if you just look at how well they've drafted and how well Howie Roseman has put this team together, it's a good assumption that they'll be a contender for the next few years.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, OJ, I want to say thanks once again. Thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it. One of
Thank
the
you, Kevin.
things, though, oh yeah, one of the things though, it's like, is let's go to the Super Bowl parade. I mean,
Mhm.
everyone saw what was going on there and all. One question I have for you: can we stop with the throwing the beers at the buses for the players? Howie Roseman catches one to the forehead. I saw one where Saquon saw it at the last minute, hit a woman in the back of the
Oh,
head.
jeez.
I think we need to stop with throwing other cans at the game, or at the parade. Does anyone else agree with me on this?
Yeah, I totally agree, Kevin. And, of all people, Howie Roseman, the architect of this franchise, of these two Super Bowls in the last several years, of all people, he gets hit with a beer can, right? So yeah, I think the city will put something in place the next time around, next parade, to say, hey, don't throw any beer. But it's almost like, okay, the same thing as far as just saying don't don't climb any of the light poles, right? But yeah, you don't want to get guys hit with a beer because that was a pretty nasty gash that Howie got.
Yeah, and in terms of the national perception of the Eagles, I go to a lot of national type events, and they say, "Oh, the fans, they're the worst," and this. Sometimes I say sometimes it may be deserved, but I think overall it's like, all right, other places are even worse. So just about the fans and how they enjoyed the day. I know I got lots of texts and everything from everybody, and they seem to be safe and have a good time at the parade.
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, you're talking about up to a million people. And I wrote in my latest article for the Tribune the city's love affair with the Eagles, right? And one of the quotes that I had is, and I try to tell outsiders this all the time, we're sort of like a dysfunctional family as far as Philly fans are concerned. We'll argue, fuss, and fight amongst each other. But if anyone outside of our region talks about our team or our players, we assemble like the Avengers versus Thanos.
I love it. That's great. Oh man. So in terms of, I dubbed this Super Bowl, OJ, the Legacy Bowl, and
Yes.
just talk a little bit about Sirianni and his legacy. And Kevin and I talked about the journey of the Eagles this season, particularly Sirianni. He's fighting with the fans, and people are calling for his head. And just talk about Sirianni and where he stands now that he won the Super Bowl.
Well, first thing, all of us as Philly guys, right? I often made the point that Nick Sirianni behaves a lot like Philly fans do. You want to cuss out the refs. You want to be flamboyant. You want to stick your chest out and all. But I also asked Sirianni after the NFC Championship game, and he gave me a great answer. I said to him, I said, both you and Jalen are now joined at the hip as far as franchise history is concerned, being the first head coach and quarterback combo to take this team to multiple Super Bowls, and how he felt about that. And he was pretty humble about it, but he looked back and reflected on it and said, "We've been through a lot. I've been through a lot." And I think also talking to the players as well, he's really grown as a coach. He's grown as a leader of men. I never thought of him as a great X and O's guys, but those 53 men in that locker room, they play for him. Whether it's the All Pros and Lane Johnson and Jalen Carter, Jalen Hurts, you name them, to the backups like Isaiah Rodgers and Keely Ringo. I've talked to those guys personally, and they all love being there and they love playing for Sirianni. So for all of his so-called weaknesses or his faults, these guys run through a brick wall for him.
Great comment. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, definitely. OJ, one of the things I think everyone's been talking about right now
Mhm.
is Kellen Moore taking the New Orleans Saints job and how the offense flowed this year. And once again, it seems to be a different offensive coordinator Jalen Hurts has to deal with every year. Do you think it's going to have a big effect on Jalen and the offense going forward with Kellen Moore gone?
I mean, Kevin, it's hard to say that. Well, you would think it would have an effect, but Jalen Hurts has been so resourceful year after year after year, and this not even goes back. It goes back to college. It goes back to high school. That he's had different play callers. One of those years is when he transferred from Alabama to Oklahoma, but there's been no stability. He's kind of talked about that. But if there's anybody that can adjust and persevere, it's been Jalen Hurts. He's proved it year after year.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great segue going into. Kevin and I were talking about this, and everybody debates it. It's even heard today. Somebody debating where Jalen Hurts stands in the NFL pantheon of quarterbacks, and uh, I just think it's ridiculous when they say he's not top five. So, should we even care about this? Talk a little bit about Jalen's legacy, OJ.
Now we shouldn't worry about whether he's top five, top 10, top whatever. Personally, I hate lists. I also wrote a story about his legacy and what he's accomplished at only 26 years old. And there were a couple graphics that came up after the Super Bowl. Even before the Super Bowl, he was the first quarterback since Jim Kelly to lose a Super Bowl and then return and win it. First Super Bowl appearance, I should say. And then the other day, I saw a graphic to where Jalen Hurts is the fourth quarterback ever to lose any Super Bowl and come back and win it. I mean, he joins Lynn Dawson, he joins Bob Greasy, and John Elway, who we all know lost his first three appearances before he was victorious. So if you take away John Elway, he's the first quarterback since Bob Greasy in 1973. So he's already in elite company. You look at some of his stats in the Super Bowl. He's the first quarterback in Super Bowl history to have 10 touchdown passes and 10 rushing touchdowns um, in Super Bowls. So he's really setting up his legacy, not only Eagles history, but NFL history. And with him being so young, with when the roster being so young, it's hard to say that he's done already because what he does and the leadership that he puts forth through the Eagles, and again, all the teammates reiterate this. They stand behind him fully, and they all believe rather, that he'll take them to multiple Super Bowls.
Yeah, agreed. Go ahead, Kev.
I think one of the things, OJ, that another thing I say, it's always funny after the Super Bowl, everyone's got their little take, and like it was Dak Prescott. It was Dak Prescott this past week that basically said that Jalen Hurts and the Eagles and Dak Prescott and the Cowboys are not that far apart. Might have been the most ridiculous thing I've heard all week. Any thoughts on that? Where Dak is heads at this point?
Well, I'll just say this: it's one thing to have confidence, and it's another thing to be delusional. And I think that's what Dak Prescott is was talking. And again, going back to you, Kevin, and what Lloyd said earlier, you can make all the lists. You could split hairs, atoms. You could split wigs, whatever. Jalen got a ring, and most of these guys that we perceive as top quarterbacks, they're not there yet. Short of Patrick Mahomes, right? Joe Burrow got to a Super Bowl, but he didn't win. And then all these other guys, we're waiting for them to get over the hump, and they haven't done it. And another thing that I asked Nick Sirianni, people are making this claim that, oh yeah, he has a stacked team. Look at NFL history. Um, Joe Montana had a stacked team. Terry Bradshaw had a stacked team. Troy Aikman, all these guys who have won multiple Super Bowls. I mean, this is only number one for Hurts, but you tell me a great quarterback or a Hall of Fame quarterback who's won a Super Bowl that hasn't had a stacked team.
No, I agree. I definitely agree with that. And that, yeah, and Kevin and I were saying a lot of similar thoughts, before you came on in. And I just think with this Eagles team, they're built right now in a good position. So we'll see how
Right.
it kind of turns out in terms of the free agents, though. OJ, who's number like if you're Howie Roseman, you're like, I gotta have this guy back. Who would that be on the current roster? That's a free
Well,
agent.
I would say without a doubt, the diamond in the rough, and that's Zach Bond. From backup linebacker or special teamer to first team All Pro. I mean, what a story, right? So I think whatever his number is going to be, you got to bring him back because he's a cornerstone of that defense. And you saw when the Kobe Dean came out, he was the one who had the green dot that went right over to Zach Vaughn, and they didn't lose a beat. Burks played well alongside him, but I think that's part of the core. And even I'm sure Vic Fangio will vouch for him too. Um, you got to perceive that the salary cap is going to go up again, and they'll be able to afford Zach Vaughn. They just can't let him get out of the building. Um, A lot of people are saying hold on to Milton Williams as well. I think he's going to command a lot of money on the market to be a starter, a full-time starter, because you know how the Eagles like to rotate the defensive line. I don't know if they can keep him, but if I had another guy as my number two, I would say Mekhi Becton. He loves being here. Um, he plugged right into that offensive line, that brotherhood. They welcome him with open arms. You see how well he played. And I don't think he's going to command a lot to want to stay in Philadelphia.
Yeah, there's some great choices, and you hit on a lot of the interesting guys at the top of their roster. But they did such a good job in the draft, and it'll see interesting to see how they pick at 32. But yeah, they're going to need some of those free agents. Kevin, one more before OJ gets out of here.
Almost definitely. OJ, going forward now, like Saquon had the year that we saw, which is one of the greatest years a running backs ever had in the history of the NFL. Going forward, though, do you worry about his workload as far as everything goes? His injury history? Was it this like, an aberration the one year, like he stayed healthy? And I think a lot of it had to do with that offensive line, him not taking those big hits. But do you
Right.
agree, like Saquon's health determines how far this team's going to go in the future?
I think so, Kevin. But you can also say that for anybody else on the roster. Of course, we always look at running backs, with more of a microscope as far as their shelf life is concerned. But he's in great shape. I think the Eagles do have a great training staff. They have a great medical staff. And that's part of the reason why I was in favor of sitting those guys in week 17, because I knew they had to win 3 games to get to the Super Bowl. And you saw how fresh he was. But I wouldn't worry about it, so to speak, because they're not going to play him in the preseason or anything like that. So I think he'll be okay. But the injury factor is always something to keep in mind. But I guess the more you think about it, the more it might happen.
Yeah.
All right, great stuff from OJ Spivey from the Philadelphia Tribune. We really appreciate you spending some time with Kevin and I here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. We'll talk to you down the line. Thanks, OJ.
Thank you, Lloyd, and thank you for Kevin for having me.
Thank
All
you,
right,
buddy.
talk to you later. Yeah, it's always great to get the beat writers and the guys that are in the locker room, and because there's always that scuttlebutt and a talk radio thing going on here in the Philadelphia area, and it's always good to hear directly from somebody who talks to the players. So we appreciate OJ coming on, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason for the Eagles. I know they just won it, but wanted to get Kevin's take on a couple of those questions that we hit OJ up with. Nick Sirianni, how should my dad, who's a season ticket holder, feel about this guy? There were so many guys after he got the job, they were like, "Oh, he's a dope." But when you look at his 54 wins, 23 losses in his career, now been to 2 Super Bowls, he's won one. Should people start giving him credit, or is it still all right? He's lucked into a great roster at how he's put together.
Did he luck into a great roster? Definitely. Did he have something to do with it? Yeah, he did. It was the planting of the flower thing that we all made fun of and everything else. But it turns out the guys in the locker room listened to it. They liked it, and they bought into what he was selling, and it worked and get him a Super Bowl. I was the one who was, I believe, brought up the fact that after the Cleveland yelling at the fans game, the next game I believe was the Giants, and I said if they lost that game, he might have gotten canned then for the embarrassment that he was the week before, and that's when they weren't playing well. Sure enough, he wins that game. He's won a Super Bowl. I myself will not say a bad thing about Nick Sirianni until January 2027. he's
Oh,
he's got
we're gonna
carte
hold him
blanche.
to it, folks. We got Angel rolling the tape.
Yeah, he's got carte blanche with me for a little bit now.
Yeah, and you definitely have to give him. You're like, all right, just chill on the Sirianni. He's a bum talk because I know after the end of you and I talked at the end of the playoffs last year where they got embarrassed by Tampa Bay, and you're like, ooh, yeah, it's gonna be tough for the Eagles to bring him back. But as OJ was saying, the locker room believes in this guy. They listen to him, and he's dialed in with these young guys, and that's all that matters. The public perception outside the room really doesn't matter. So, he's done a great job in terms of him and Howie partnering together and building a team, and we'll just see how it goes. But as we were saying, every season's different. The page will start turning soon, and people will say, "Okay, the parade's over, and time to get ready for next season." So, um, one of the other big stories, got to get your take on because you're in the Mid Atlantic area, you're down near Baltimore now.
I,
Justin Tucker.
I
I
know where
know
you're going. I
I
know
know
where
you
you're
don't want to
going.
talk about it. I know you don't want to talk about it. I remember when, because I had covered Michael Vick and we wrote the book Third and a Mile on the history of black quarterback. A lot of people kept it, when he got in all his mess, they had me on talking about him and you don't want to talk about it, but it's topical. So Justin Tucker, additional 7 women have come forward. Now there's 16 massage therapists and right now it's a Baltimore Banner story, so they're doing the investigation. It's not even at the police level. What do you think is going to happen here with Justin Tucker?
I think Justin Tucker, I once again, we are in a society, unfortunately, where you're guilty until proven innocent a lot of the time, especially in media. Justin Tucker, though, it comes back to, I hate to bring up the Cosby, Deshaun Watson thing, where it's like, oh, one or two people say something, and it's like, I don't know. Once you get to like 15, 30, it's like, you know what? At least two of them are telling the truth here.
Yeah, where there's smoke,
Something
there's
happened.
fire, man.
Yeah, something happened here. And as few of kickers there are in the NFL Hall of Fame, Justin Tucker might have just cost himself the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you brought up because I was on Rich's show earlier today, and he asked me that, and most of the guys in the Hall of Fame that have gotten in trouble, it was after they got the gold jacket. Your
Mhm.
Lawrence Taylor and some of these other guys. Um, that have had issues. OJ Simpson, obviously. Do you take the jacket from him?
Yeah.
But this was debated when Ray Lewis went in. He got in his situation, and uh, luckily for him, he overcame it, and he kept going in his playing career. But Tucker, it's a great point you bring up. I was looking at his numbers: 417 for 468 on field goals, 89%. So I'm pretty sure that's the percentage leader for a career. This
Hmm.
year was kind of tough. Uh, you know, it takes 44-man panel from most of those guys are Pro Football Writers Association that are on the selection committee. Um, and they're going to have to debate that. I think he's going to have to wait. They
Yeah.
made T.O. wait and they made Owens wait because he was a bad guy. You know what I mean? It wasn't even like he had the rap sheet. You know what I mean? So Tucker is 35. Do you think the Ravens bring him back? They were already saying Harbaugh is zero tolerance type policy, and I still think they're always kind of queasy after the whole Ray Rice situation where they kind of stood by him, and then the tape came out, and then they got rid of him. So what do you think in terms of Tucker and his future?
I think it happened at the worst part of Tucker's career. I think we saw last year that, there's only so many kicks in that leg. And he might be basically close to being done as far as being the kicker for Baltimore was going to happen anyway. You bring this up as well. He's a PR nightmare. It's like you wouldn't want any parts of him being on your team at that point. But like Ray Rice in his situation, Ray was coming off he wasn't Ray Rice of previous years when that incident came out. And I believe if you have the ability, someone will pick you up, someone will put you on the field as long as you can win games. Ray Rice and Justin Tucker, oddly enough, both Baltimore. These guys, I don't think Ray Rice at his time, Tucker now, can do a lot to help a team to win. So henceforth, if they go away, they're just gonna be remembered for their actions at the
Yeah,
end.
and I totally agree with you, Kevin. If you can still play and you're worth the pain that the media and some of the fans, firestorm that's going to come and signing you, and you can still perform, there's going to be a job for you in the National Football League. Unfortunately, there's been guys that have all sorts of heinous, crimes and civil situations that the public knows about, but they still got signed. And it's also about second chances in the league, but you gotta humble yourself and I talked to Michael Vick when he came back with the Eagles. I remember I was covering the team, and that was you talking about a crazy situation. I remember being at that first preseason game, and I think it was the Jaguars, and there were people outside protesting, and We all talk about we have friends and family that are fans of the team. They're, a couple of my, I'll never go to another game. Well, they were back. That's another story, And then he went out and he gets on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and he plays really well on Monday Night Football, et cetera. And it was a magical season in 2010, and a lot of people forgot about it. So we'll see if this gets to the back page. But as you said, Tucker at 35, coming off a season 22 of 30 on field goal attempts, just didn't look right. I have a feeling the Ravens will definitely bring somebody in. They'll sign and they'll have him compete, probably a younger kicker. And right now it's just a newspaper story. So if it gets to the Roger Goodell level, and we're talking suspensions, et cetera, it could be the end for him. So we'll see. We're talking about off-season news and notes here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We had O.J. Spivey on from the Philadelphia Tribune earlier. Thanks for him coming on, talking about the Eagles' season and the parade and everything he saw. Kevin, as we move forward, the NFL Combine's coming up. Now, it's February 24th through March 3rd at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. I like to call it the Underwear Olympics. I've been there before, and it's more about it's almost like a convention for the teams to get together and kind of talk and maybe make some deals before free agency and all the situation starts when the league year turns. But what do you think about the Combine, and do you think like guys like Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter work out?
First of all, I like to refer to the combine as the Mike Mamula Invitational. Who can sit there and put up the best fraud numbers to get a high draft pick in the top 10 and turn out to be a bust? That's what the combine's always good for. Well, at least one guy's going to sneak into the top 10 that normally shouldn't be there if they didn't have it. As far as Hunt and Sanders and those guys, I mean, I'll put myself as a fan. Would you like to see it? Oh, absolutely. You want to see what those guys do. I mean, there's a reason why they're going 1, 2, 3. I want to watch them on the field. That being said, if I was on the agent side, no. It's like all you're going to do, most likely, is jeopardize some money, and you're going to leave some money on the table. I mean, I always am against like guys who don't want to throw and everything else. Like, come on, man, just get out there and throw the ball. But then again, I get it. It's like all I can do is hurt my value. Why am I going to do this?
Yeah, you made a great point there, because it seems recently in the younger players, they listen to those agents, and the agents sending them, to California, Florida, Arizona for a month to work out and get ready for the combine, and they don't want them working out there, uh, you know, whether usually the pro days, they want them to have the home court advantage, and they don't want them to go out in the combine and pull a hamstring or
Mhm.
whatever. I think though most of the prospects will go there and interview, and that's what Shedeur Sanders has kind of been on his PR tour. He's
Mhm.
trying to make himself into that number one overall pick, and we'll see if that happens for him. Um, but yeah, the combine, it's just an opportunity to kind of, all right, turn the page, get ready for the season that's coming. The free agency period will begin. Well, March 4th is franchise tag time. I wanted to get your feeling on this. The Bengals have already come out and say T. Higgins, they want him back. They're going to franchise tag him. And I just said, oh boy, here comes Mike Brown and his team once again. They're going to try to underpay somebody, and there's going to be animosity. And are they going to be able to get T. Higgins in the door? They're already. Did they pay Chase? I'm trying to remember. No, they haven't not
Nope.
paid Chase yet, so they got to pay him, and he wants Justin Jefferson type money. So I just think Higgins is kind of afterthought, but Burrow, I'm sure, wants both of them back. So talk about the franchise tag and T. Higgins.
Well, yeah, I believe Burrow even came out and said recently it's like he wants them to lock up, obviously, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Hendrickson as well is owed some money coming. I mean, the guy led the league in sacks. So, I mean, they have some money they have to lock up here with some guys. I always feel bad for a guy that gets tagged 2 years in a row. Like, they're not happy. They're not happy at work. But Mike Brown, he said in Cincinnati, they don't spend money. They have never spent money. So it's got to be frustrating for Joe Burrow as well being there if they don't keep all three of these guys.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting there. So that's be March 4th. What they call the legal tampering period will be March 10th through the 12th. And then the league, and so in that time, that's where all the deals start getting done. But the league year, basically, the calendar return on March 12th at um, basically midnight. So that's when all the signings will happen, and teams will have to figure out what they're going to do. We talked about the Eagles and their free agents, and every team's got the same situation. They got to rebuild for next season. Um, and the league owners will get together March 30th through April 2nd. That's down in West Palm. And then the draft. Now, how do you? I think we talked about this in the past, but the draft, it's become a spectacle. This year, it's going to be the April 24th to 26th, Green Bay, Wisconsin. Wouldn't it be crazy if it snowed?
Oh yeah. Well, no,
So just
they love a scene for it. And especially put it at of all places, Green Bay. They love to show off Green Bay, and it's become its own. I mean, remember the days on ESPN where they would just have the guys with a bunch of cigarettes in an ashtray and like the helmet phone, and they're wearing like the checkered jackets, handing it to somebody to walk up at the last second. Oh no, you have to have the laser light show and everything else now. It's a spectacle. You're right.
and the fans are going to be out there, and the NFL, they want the money. They like the traveling circus. They move it around, and they always want to stay on the front page. So this will already be, I guess, spring training will be over, and MLB will be starting, and the NBA playoffs around that time. But the NFL always seems to find a way to get the front of the sports page. I know nobody reads a paper anymore, but on the front of all the websites and everything. And it was proven because Super Bowl, I think, was one of the most watched. You know, I don't know, it was one of the top 10 or something like that. But everybody's watching football. And I think gambling has a lot to do with it. I don't care what nobody says. Everybody wants a little cheddar cheese on it,
Mhm,
and
mhm.
so I think it has a lot to do with it. And in terms of free agency, they already started announcing June. The June 1st cut date is kind of when you can spread cap money across. Your buddy Aaron Rodgers, the Jets finally said they don't want him back. We all knew it. They said we're not bringing him back. We're probably going to cut him June 1st, and they'll spread a cap hit of $49 million over 2 years. Just talk a little bit about Aaron Rodgers and his tenure with the Jets. We all know it wasn't a success. I mean, was it ultimate failure?
Absolutely. Absolutely, it was a failure. And it's not only that. I mean, you were studying the growth of Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall. You sat there and brought Devontae Adams in. I mean, basically, you did everything in your power to make this guy a winner with the Jets. When at the end of the day, was his heart completely into it being there? Probably not. Is he trying to cash paychecks and, once again, himself stay relevant for his legacy? Yeah, that's why he was there. He was there for Aaron Rodgers, nobody else, not that team. The question is now, because he wants to play apparently another season, will somebody bring him in?
Yeah, and then he got Robert Salah and Joe Douglas, the GM and the coach, both fired. So they're moving forward. And Aaron Glenn said, I want to start anew. And I was asked this on another show, and it's interesting because Aaron Rodgers is 41 years old. The biggest thing was apparently they said they didn't want him doing McAfee, and they wanted him to show up for OTAs and all the offseason activities, which he has not done in terms of his past couple of years. And I think that's what it's going to take. He's going to have to acquiesce and push off a lot of things that he did in the past. Now, there are obviously teams that need a quarterback and a quarterback needy, but would he go there? And this would kind of, I think the draft's going to kind of dictate. So I was looking at a couple teams, the Titans, they got that terrible Will Levis situation. Obviously, they're picking number one. Do they go get Travis Hunter and then sign an Aaron Rodgers? It's going to take a lot for them because uh, Callahan will be in his second season, and does he want to deal with that headache? We'll see there. I was on with Rich Q on his show. He's a big Giants guy. I was teasing him. I said, "Well, maybe he'll go across the locker room to the Giants," And he said, "I don't want that mess," And but they're another team you got to watch if he wants to play. And I'll throw another one, and then you can chime in. The Raiders. What are the Raiders going to do? I mean, they went with Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. Do they take a look? But Tom Brady is very entrenched now with that ownership group and in that front office. I don't even know if he got along with with Aaron Rodgers, and would he bring him in there? So I say he retires. So what do you think he's going to do?
I think if you're a GM and you bring in Aaron Rodgers, you're splitting up your locker room. He's going to basically, separate himself with maybe one or two other guys. That's the only people he's going to talk to. It's going to be your team's just going to be against each other the whole year. Why put yourself through all that? Also, I think Aaron Rodgers is of the type because his ego is massive. We all know that. He's always the smartest guy in the room. And if he starts getting lowballed and told what to do, he's not going to listen at this point in his career. He's going to take his ball and go home, which is probably the best thing for him at this point.
Yeah, I think that ego is going to play a big part in it, Kevin. I think he's when you're sitting at the negotiating table, there's a reason why these players have an agent because that agent will take all the arrows and you don't have to hear that. But he's going to have to hear, GMs and people say, look, you're 41. You've regressed the last couple of years. The Jets only won 6 games underneath you, and they probably could have did that under Zach Wilson. I mean, what are you really bringing to the table at 41? And you're bringing that attitude to the locker room and you can't get along with younger players because that's what LaFleur and everybody was saying in Green Bay when they let him go. And I just think he's not worth the headache. With kind of like we were talking about earlier, is the juice worth the squeeze?
Yeah.
And I don't think GMs and owners are going to say, he's worth because he's going to want $45 million. No way.
Right? No.
You're not going to pay that guy that type of money. So I think Rodgers is not going to have a lot of takers. Maybe he gets a lowball offer from a bad team, and you know how that's going to turn out. If he goes to one of these really bad teams and he's behind a bad offensive line, he's going to start complaining. It's going to be a problem. So now I think he's just going to retire. So that's going to be one of the big stories this off season, and it's crazy because Brett Favre, he called Brett Favre, and it's sort of like with Favre at the end, it was like, all right, did you retire, not retire, and then eventually he's like, all right, just go away, so because there's younger guys out there, and there's so many more stories to talk about. So we'll see about Aaron Rodgers. Um, Wanted to get your take on the LA Rams have told Cooper Kupp he's 30 years old. They said you can look for a new home. They're trying to trade him, but they may end up cutting him as well. So Cooper Kupp, does he still have life around the league, and what do you see his future kind of going?
Cooper Kupp, I mean, for a brief period there, he was it. He was the number one wide receiver. I mean, fantasy, regular football, real life football, I should say. He was the guy. The injuries, especially with someone with his skill set, though, that's the thing you have to worry about. Obviously, he wasn't what he used to be when he came back this year. But will some time off maybe, let him heal up a little more? It could be a situation that's comparable, even though it wasn't like the same injury circumstances. Adam Thielen, when he left Minnesota, kind of was like,
Yeah.
all right, he's done. He's going to disappear. That's it. And he's been very productive for Carolina in what he's done down there. So I think Cooper Kupp can still play. I don't think the Rams are going to get what they think they can for him. I mean, I think they might have to end up cutting him. I mean, give him a 5th rounder, a 6th rounder maybe for Cooper Kupp. Maybe a
Yeah,
6th. Yeah.
yeah, and somebody's going to give him the opportunity. And the thing is, yeah, Cubs 67 receptions on 100 targets, 710 yards, 6 TDs in 12 games. So as you said, he's missed some games, kind of injury prone at this point in his career. I think somebody will give him an opportunity. The funny thing about Thielen is there's already some Eagles I've heard saying, because I think he's on 1-year deal with Carolina, like, why don't you come here to Philadelphia and be our third receiver? So
Oh, yeah.
do you think that could happen with Thielen? I mean, like you said, he's had kind of a rebirth. He's kind of figured out, okay, I'm not going to be that number one receiver anymore, but I can do some damage out of the slot and help out a good team. He definitely helped out Bryce Young this year, maybe ring chases with the Eagles.
That's exactly what it is. You get to that final year or two of your career, it's like, you know what? I want a ring. I will be the third option here as far as the wide receivers go. Why wouldn't you want to be honest? If you're out there, AJ and Devontae are going to be covered up. You're going to, I mean, if you can get open, I mean, Dotson was always good for one or two targets in the first quarter, then you never see him again. But at least you get like a pass or two your way. Yeah, I would definitely take him in a heartbeat if I was Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Thiel's going to be a name. You know, I don't think they'll franchise him, but Carolina, they should earmark him. Canales, their head coach, should definitely say, okay, try to bring him back because he definitely, I thought, was a mentor and helped Bryce Young mature during the season. Because I remember you and I, we had our buddy Jeff Little from out in L.A. come on, and we were talking about, Bryce Young, he's done. So what what a great season he had. So we'll see how that turns out. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're talking about the upcoming NFL offseason. Another receiver. This one's interesting, and I know as an Eagles person, you're like, boo. Debo Samuel. He's, he has Niners basically told him to kick rocks. They said you can pursue a trade. Um, I think he's almost pretty much done. I think they did used him too much as a running back, very beat up. He only had 51 receptions, 4 TDs this past season. They've allowed him to go get a trade. Do you think there's going to be a big market for Debo Samuel?
Not in the shape I saw him in. Did you see the picture of him wearing an Eagles jersey? He had like about 20 pounds of stomach on him. I don't know what he's been doing, but he is definitely not running like he used to. So yeah, I think Debo is, unless he really changes his workout regimen over this, the summer. I mean, yeah, he's probably done for the most part. Someone will bring him in and he'll get. I guarantee he gets a hamstring injury and then just disappears.
Yeah, he'll, and it happens with receivers. I still remember Mark Duper signing with the Eagles and coming to
Yeah.
training camp when he was done, and you knew he was done. He got cut. Carlos Carson,
Oh
he
yeah.
had a cup of coffee with the Eagles late, and it's funny with receivers. They always got to have that last stop before they say, "Oh, yeah, I'm done," or the
Mhm.
NFL kind of retires him on his own. So I think Debo will get an opportunity, but yeah, he's going to have to get in better shape, and the Niners, they have Pearsall, but Ayuk's coming off a very bad knee injury. That's another team. You're like, okay, how are they going to kind of move forward? So, um, and we'll kick a little fantasy football. What do you think in terms of Christian McCaffrey? I mean, is he done? Is he still? Everybody had to have him in the fantasy football drafts. What do you think is going to happen with McCaffrey?
I have never drafted Christian McCaffrey 1 year in my life in fantasy football because I was waiting for him to get hurt every year. Every now and then he didn't get hurt. I was like, all right, then, you got me. It's just year after year, there's something with the guy, and it's not going to get any better. I mean, he's another guy. There's a lot of tread off the tires. There's a lot of receptions, rushes, and it just takes a toll on a body after a certain amount of time.
Yeah, and in terms of fantasy, consensus number one Saquon. I think Saquon Barkley will be number one pick. Um, but like we talked about with OJ Spivey earlier in the show, the wear and tear. 2,000 yards. He had more yards than any back in a season. He beat Terrell Davis's record, and rightfully so. He should probably be the number one guy off the board in terms of fantasy football. But what do you think? Do you think the Eagles will back off in terms of Saquon's touches? Will they find somebody to draft it or bring back Gainwell? I mean, how do you think they'll manage this whole situation?
I think for Philadelphia to be as successful as they were this season, they can't back off. They have to play with Saquon like that. I thought this year that they just had, he wouldn't get as many touches, going forward because they were afraid, they wanted him to be fresh. Nah, they gave him the ball all year long. And I think it's another situation where, and Saquon's going to want the ball too. It's, unless they're in blowout situations where he's like, no, let the other guys eat, and play. He's going to want to be in there. He's going to want the ball. And that's just the only way I think he knows how to play. The question is, how many years of Saquon at top level can you get like that?
And it's going to be interesting because the Eagles, all their players in the roster, they're going to have to kind of put last season's success behind them. You can't, because I've seen that with some other championship teams in the past where you got fat on the rubber chicken circuit, they call it. You
Mhm.
used to see that with the Heisman Trophy winner. He'd get to the NFL and then he just was not the same guy. And they always say about Rashawn Salam. You know what I mean? Like he came to the NFL and he just was not the same player because he kind of got he blew up on the rubber chicken circuit and enjoyed himself a little too much. And then there were still games to be played. So I don't think that'll happen with Saquon, but it's a situation where you got to stay hungry, and I think the Eagles will find a way. In terms of Gainwell, I do think that they may move on from him and look for another younger option. As I said, they have Will Shipley there, and you can find other backup backs out there to kind of step in and fill a role kind of cheaper. And
Mhm.
Gainwell may get some money, so that's going to be interesting there. In terms of dollars, Miles Garrett, and I always tell Nate, Nate, who's my son, 19, and he always says about the NFL's turning to the NBA, and I'm like, no, it's not. I said, yeah, Miles Garrett, who's 29, he's demanding a trade from the Browns. Yeah, I would demand a trade from the Browns too. They stink. They never win
Mhm.
anything. But that doesn't mean Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Barry, their general manager, are going to acquiesce. Talk a little bit about Garrett, and does he have a chance of pushing his way out the door?
Getting out of Cleveland's like getting paroled. It's like you just hope your hearing comes up and you get the votes to get out of there. I mean, nobody wants to go there. Since Bernie Kosar, I probably was kicking his feet going from University of Miami to Cleveland. Nobody wants to play in Cleveland. Cleveland has an ultimate PR nightmare with Deshaun Watson. And one of your best players that you've had probably in the last 10 to 20 years wants out. It's like that's a tough sell to that fan base. And to get equal value for him is going to be very hard for him. The teams that he's mentioned on the list, or at least the betting odds and everything to go to, are in the same division. And I mean, even though they're Cleveland, I don't think they're going to do something like that. So you have to make it make sense to your fan base if you're the Browns, and to just playing to try to win in general.
Yeah, and they have to have some kind of something to excite the fans. And having a guy like Miles Garrett, 6-time Pro Bowler, Defensive Player of the Year, um, he sells tickets, and that's what they need to do because, as you said, you got the mess with Deshaun Watson. Stefanski hung on as the head coach, and you'll see, you know, is he going to be able to come back and uh, we'll see if they bring back Jameis. I don't know if you saw him running around the Super Bowl and all the media stuff, and yeah, you can comment on that. But Garrett had 14 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery. So he's a game record. But as you said, it's Cleveland. They made the playoffs twice in his 8 years, and he probably wants out. But it's going to take somebody to have a Khalil Mack type deal thrown in their lap. If you remember,
Hmm.
was the Bears threw all that money and draft picks at the Raiders, and the Raiders said, "Go ahead, take them." And then you could see over the years in Chicago, it just didn't really work out, and they gave up a lot to get Mack. And then he's now running around for the Chargers.
Yeah, it's especially for a defensive player as well. It just seems like when they do those huge Herschel Walker type deals where they give up so much to get the player, it usually doesn't work out. It's just I don't know if it's the fact where the team because the team that's trading for this player usually is a team that's desperate and has nothing else around it. So you almost go to Siberia when you get traded to these other teams. So for him to end up on a playoff contending team, that'd be a difference.
Yeah, and then I know Nate was like, "Oh, I want my Bills to get him." I said, "Well, they're going to have to lay a boatload of picks on the Browns, and then if I'm the Browns and Andrew Barry, their general manager, I'd say, well, why do I want to? The Bills picking 30th or something like that. That pick's not in the first round. That's not worth a lot. So he's going to have to get traded to a bad team where they know they're going to get a good draft position, kind of like what um, the Bears did with Carolina, because Carolina they knew they were going to kind of struggle, and then they ended up getting the number one overall pick. So we'll see how that works out. In the end, I think Garrett is going to end up with the Browns. He's going to have to play out his his options there, and um, but like anything in NFL, they're just going to stay on top of it and keep their guys because the owners have the hammer. I don't know how many times I have to tell these young guys that the NFL's a lot different. They're going to We see that with Tariq Hill. He was demanding his way out of the Dolphins. What was that? Week 17, and then by the conference championships, he's like, "Oh, I'm ready to be back in Miami and looking forward to it." Yeah, that's because they're not getting rid of you unless they want to. So we'll see how that works out. Wanted to get your take on another guy here in Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Your buddy Chip Kelly, the Chippa. He gets $6 million a season to become the offensive coordinator for the Raiders. I mean, Pete Carroll, 73 years old. I mean, why would he do this?
I just think it's one of those things. Mark Davis, he just likes names. He likes names, and he likes to. I mean, if you can't put a quality product on the field that people know who the players are, at least they'll know who the coaching staff is. And that's the identity they're building for this team now. It's like, what are you going to try to sell Bowers as your best player there, and Max Crosby? It's like, all right, we can't really focus on them because not enough people know their names. So let's go to the coaching staff now. Let's get some names on this and see what we can do.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting to see how that one shakes out in terms of will they have success. And Pete Carroll at his age, does he still relate to these young guys? And speaking of young guys, let's look a little bit at the draft. At number one, you got the Tennessee Titans. As I said, Brian Callahan's there. He's in his second season. They got a mess at quarterback. Will Levis, Mason Rudolph. I mean, just terrible. But it seems, and we'll see how everything shakes out, but it seems like Travis Hunter, the Heisman Trophy winner, everybody's saying he should be the number one pick. If you're the Titans, do you take Hunter or do you go for, Sanders, Cam Ward, or any of these other quarterbacks out there?
It's very few times that you get the number one pick, and especially if you're in a season where you need a quarterback, you got to roll the dice and take one. I mean, who knows if you're going to be in that position again? You might end up next year. You might stink, but you'll be like in the third or fourth spot. You won't be able to get the top quarterback. If you get a chance for that number one pick and you need a quarterback, you have to go get it. And I believe it should be Cam Ward.
Yeah, Ward's up there, and then we'll see about Sanders. They're talked about Jackson Dart from Ole Miss is kind of moving up some boards. But you have to have a quarterback, and rightfully or wrongfully, that's got to be your building block of your team because they're the face of the franchise. We talked about Jalen Hurts earlier and how he's the leader of the Eagles, and you can name any team, and the first thing you think about is their quarterback. So the Titans got to find somebody. It's a sleepy town, unfortunately, a fan base. They moved there from Houston all those years ago, and I think the fan base kind of starved since Steve McNair, Eddie George days, where they had, stars, and Levis is terrible. He puts mayonnaise in coffee for God's sake. I mean, that's disgusting. And he throws way too many interceptions. So I say the Titans do need to get a quarterback. The Cleveland Browns, we kind of just talked about their situation. Deshaun Watson, he injured his Achilles. He had to have another surgery on it. He's under contract for 25 and 26 at $92 million guaranteed. What do the Browns do? I know we just kind of talked about them a few minutes ago, but do they get another quarterback in there? I tend to think they're going to re-sign Jameis and maybe go for, I don't know, one of these offensive linemen.
I mean, yeah, you might as well because it doesn't matter who you draft. You're not going to be good anyway. There's too much. You need too much there, and this is one of those drafts. If you don't need a quarterback, and say Sanders, Ward, and you sit there and put Hunter in there in the mix of that as well. If you're out of the top three, because there's always somebody who wants to trade up, like to get Jackson Dart or somebody like that. Someone's going to offer you a boat to get up to the number 4 pick or so. Trade back. If you need that many different things on your team, trade back and get multiple draft picks and try to build it. Don't go for one guy and try to rebuild.
Yeah, and their GMs need to look at kind of what the teams that have success. The Chiefs with Brett Veach and the Eagles with Howie Roseman, how they're kind of building their team and kind of imitate them. I know the NFL's a copycat league, so a lot of teams will be looking at that Eagles model and try to say, okay, how can we build that? I was talking about this team on Rich's show earlier today. The New York Giants, they're at number 3. They need a quarterback. I mean, Daniel Jones, they finally cut him. I think he ended the season with the Vikings on their bench. But at 3, do they wait and see who drops to them? Even like if Shador Sanders goes there, I think that's going to be, you talk about, we always talk about, man, Dallas and the circus that's there. If Shador goes to the New York Giants in that market with Dion as his father, I mean, what do you think of the Giants at 3?
I think if you're the Giants and Sanders falls here, you got to take him. You have to. Once again, it's the same thing like with Tennessee. It's like you're in this spot, you go grab him. See what you got because it's gonna be better than anything you bring in. That's for sure. What are you gonna bring? Try to get DeVito back in and his posse and everything else. It's like you've seen how that works out. Uh, I tell you what, could you imagine if Sanders? Because they do have a little bit of talent there, not a lot, but they got a little bit of skill play guys there with Malik Neighbors and everything else. And it's like that wouldn't be the worst place he could land. But it's up to the Giants not to be the Giants if he went there.
Yeah, and the Giants are looking up. They're looking up the Eagles in that division. Jaden Daniels, he's not going anywhere anytime soon with Washington. I mean, he's going to be a problem for that division for the next 8 years or so. Yeah, the Giants got a lot to clean up. So yeah, maybe they think about trading back, but I think if they can get a quarterback, why not grab one? And Shador Sanders is there, have him be the guy. I'm interested to see how Cam Ward works out in the if he works out at the combine, how his pro day goes, and because it's definitely going to be a quarterback. You know how it is. They get enamored with these quarterbacks, and I'll tell you who may be the best player, and a lot of he may be a steal. We talked about Myles Garrett earlier. Penn State edge Abdul Carter. Just talk about him a little bit, and he's just an explosive player.
Explosive is exactly the word I was thinking when you said it. I mean, it's everyone gets so locked in on the quarterbacks that you forget like the other guys who are the best at their position in college. I mean, there's very few misses, but they happen. That kid looks like he can play. He looks like as soon as he hits the field, he's going to hit the ground running.
An interesting thing is Jacksonville's at 5. If you're the Patriots at 4, Jacksonville at 5, and he falls in their lap, they should be thanking their lucky stars because they're two teams that really need defense. You got Mike Vrabel coming in with the Patriots. He was a former outside rusher. They can do a lot of great things with Abdul Carter. So it'll be interesting to see if he falls in their lap. One of the other teams, they're picking the Raiders at 8. They need everything. And then you talk about the wild card that was Mark Davis, and they really don't have a quarterback. And now they have Tom Brady in the ownership group. Do they find a way to move up, or do they stay pat and pick a lineman? What do you think they're going to do?
I think they'll try to move up. I think Davis likes the splash factor too much. He wants to be a part of it. He's one of those guys, he likes the camera on him. So if there's something that he can do to put together, I mean, think about it. They do need a lot, but you just said not too long ago, it's like you need a quarterback. You need to do something with the quarterback position. If not, you're running the Gardner Minshew's and Aiden O'Connell's out there again, and you're in the same spot that you were. You have to roll. You have to go all in sometimes and try to make the move. I mean, more times than not, it's probably going to be the wrong one moving up to get a quarterback, but you got to do it.
Yeah, and that's going to be interesting to see because somebody's going to reach for one of these quarterbacks. I don't know, but Jackson Dart. We'll see about him. I know Beck got hurt kind of late. Jalen Milroe. He reminds me a lot of Anthony Richardson. Jalen Milroe coming out of Alabama. It's like, is he consistent enough to be a week in, week out starter? What do you think about Jalen Milroe? I know some people are like, oh, maybe he should take some reps at receiver or something else. I'd say let him try to be a quarterback, but he needs to work on his consistency.
I think if you're going to take him anywhere high, you can't risk a project with like a first-round pick, a second-round pick, that kind of thing. You need someone who's going to play that position and not bump him around. Hunter might be the one exception to the rule because you might be able to use him on both sides of the field. But for a quarterback / whatever you want to make him into, you can't. And I wouldn't do it anyway.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because they were talking about the combine. Will he work out, not work out? Now, my sons have been all over me about this guy, and they said, "Oh, he's great, and he should have won the Heisman and everything." Boise State running back Ashton Genty. It now, if I'm picking in fantasy, I do want to grab him wherever he goes. But how high do you think he's going to go, Kevin? And how do you think he'll, you know, compare with? I won't say we can't compare him against to a Saquon or anything like that. You know, but maybe like to a Bijan Robinson, one of them young guys.
That's exactly what I was thinking, like Bijan. I see him somewhere between maybe, say, at the highest 7, at the lowest 13, 14 he falls. He's going to be somewhere in there. Someone's going to, but it's one of those things where no one's really taking a lot of running backs as high anymore. So he might be the one of this draft class. But I mean, I agree with you. Wherever team he lands on is definitely a team that needs a running back that's taking somebody in the first round. Oh, fantasy! I'm gonna be eyeing him up.
Yeah, and we've seen rookie running backs come in and make an immediate impact and
Hmm.
get their receptions, their touches, and I think wherever he goes, he's going to get his chance because there are some running back needy teams out there. Um, Being from Pennsylvania, a lot of people, including me, and I went to the Penn State Washington game and got this watch this guy, front and center, Tyler Warren. And after you watch what Brock Bowers has done, I mean, a lot of people got a man crush on this Tyler Warren. I think he's going to come in the league and just take over at the position. I think um, you think about the Chiefs, and we'll kind of lead us in. Do you think Kelsey comes back? But Warren, where do you think he's going to go? And should the Chiefs try to move up to get him?
My own personal opinion is I think Travis Kelsey is done. I think that you can tell on the field, he's not all there as far as like wanting to be there into the game plan. He seems distracted, like, he's kind of going through the motions, and he seemed like that mostly all season long. That's why Noah Gray was getting the touches he was getting during the season. Now, do I think he'll retire? That I'm not so sure of, because I think he still wants to go out on his own terms. He doesn't want to go out like he did, so he might try to run it back for one more season. If I'm the Chiefs and he's there, or you even have to move up just a little bit to get him, or a lot actually maybe, but I'd make the move because Mahomes is still young enough. You have the other guys that you still have some weapons there. You just need to replace your tight end and get some productivity out of him.
Yeah, and Warren's interesting because they use him in a wildcat. He's really good in space. He's a good blocker. I mean, he's that new age tight end. He can do a lot of things, and I do agree with you. The Chiefs picking so high at 31, they're going to have to move down if they want a chance to get him. I know some of these other teams would jump at the opportunity to get him. Maybe Dallas at 12. They haven't had they've had serviceable tight ends recently, but they haven't had you know that game breaker, and he could be somebody for them. So that's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Kevin and I are going over news and notes. One last thing I wanted to get your take on in the last couple minutes. Jonathan Martin. I don't know if you saw this.
Hmm.
He goes on ESPN and he says, "Oh no, I wasn't bullied." He's kind of backed off of his 2013 situation. And people are saying, "Oh, incognito is, is vindicated." Well, Richie did something. He did something. He's no choir boy. So, talking about Jonathan Martin, do you even care about this at Bullygate?
Bringing up Jonathan Martin's like bringing up Monte Teo and his invisible girlfriend stuff again. It's like, aren't we past all this? It's like, oh, it came back again. Jonathan Martin. The thing is, I mean, Richie Incognito is a meathead. We always knew he was. It's not. You're not telling us anything we don't know. But Jonathan Martin now, with the facts that he's saying now, his mom and dad intervened and say he was bullied and everything. I was like, why are your parents talking for you when you're a grown man drafted in the NFL? That's not a good look, my friend. That's going to get you hazed and bullied. So, I mean, it's one of those guys, it's like, just stay down. Just stay down. Don't even do any interviews at this point.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys. He didn't fit in their locker room, and I don't think he loved football. It was just something that he kind of did, and he's moved on. He's at Wharton, and good for him. And he turned the page to the next part of your life, and obviously it was an organizational failure by the Dolphins. Joe Philbin, the offensive line coach Jim Turner, they were kind of involved in this after the Wells report came out, but why bring this up? Why relive it? So we'll see how it turns out. But I just thought that was interesting that this story ESPN decided to run it and everybody started talking about it. So we'll see about Jonathan Martin. I think he got his last 15 minutes and he can go sell Bitcoin. I think that's what he's talking about doing now. So hopefully he make a lot of money at it. But another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I appreciate Kevin joining me for another week. We had great guests at OJ Spivey from the Philadelphia Tribune. Great job from him talking about the Eagles locker room and the parade. And we will talk to you next week. As I always say, the NFL never sleeps, and there'll always be something to talk about. Talk to you later.